on my mind.
Hello and welcome to episode 48 of the award-winning combat sports podcast, The Boxing Show, with me, your host, Rob Tebbutt. As always, I'd like to remind everybody to please like, comment and subscribe. Turn your notifications on for more boxing content. Now that's out of the way, I'm delighted to be joined this week by special guest panelist, the WBO cruiserweight champion of the world, Chris Billam-Smith, and Ben Whittaker's favourite commentator, Mr. Andy Clarke, as we review this past weekend's action. Guys, how are we doing?
I feel like we're better than you, mate. You've had a long weekend of staying up late. But
you look a bit shop-worn over there, Rob, if I'm honest.
Yeah, man, there's a lot of miles on the clock out
there.
There
are.
Yeah, it's hard graft.
You look like you've had a 12-round war at heavyweight, mate. You know.
It wouldn't be any other weight class, mate. Now. You look like you've been in a featherweight dust-up, mate, over there. Yes, how are we doing? Chris, obviously, nice to have you here. We have a rule here that we have to have at least one WBO champion on the pod every single time. No Barry today. Not massively sad about that, to be honest, because the state that I'm in, he'd absolutely tear me to pieces. But thanks very much for joining us, Chris.
No, thanks for having me. It's always good to be on after a very, very good weekend of boxing. And one I'm very pleased about as well.
A very, very, very good weekend of boxing that we'll do our best to try and decipher over the course of the next 5 hours or so, or however long we're going to be doing this. But Andy, starting on Friday, we had Oscar Valdez and Liam Wilson, and obviously ran all the way through to the end of the weekend last night with Wardley Clarke. Pretty enjoyable weekend of boxing.
Yeah, it was. Bank holiday weekend over here, and there was just boxing to watch left, right and centre, which is always great. And periods like that, every time they happen, I do just kind of sit and let myself think about the fact that we do have it really, really good these days in terms of what we can watch. You know, there's virtually no fight that you can't find out there somewhere. And that didn't always used to be the case. It didn't always used to be like that. So the fact that we have all of this stuff available to us, coming at you thick and fast over the course of a few days is brilliant.
Yeah, I mean, 4 shows from Friday to Sunday. There was a Pro Box card on the Wednesday as well, and then there was a DAZN card on the Thursday. So technically, it's 5 days in a row of non-stop boxing, and all in their own right, sort of decent cards as well. So yes, a lot to get through today. So with that being said, let's start at the end and work our way back. We're going to start with Wardley Clarke. Where else to start? Chris, I mentioned to you yesterday after the fight, I mean, you've been in some pretty tasty dust-ups yourself, but that last night at the O2 Arena was something pretty special.
Yeah, I'm glad I haven't been in one that brutal yet, and I hope not to be honest with you. It was a savage war, wasn't it? It was what the British title seems to bring sometimes it brings a lot of pride, and two great lads. You know, I get on with both men, and a draw. I mean, everyone was pushing me for a prediction beforehand, and I really couldn't pick one. They were like, if you had to put your house on it, and I was like, well, based on experience, I'd pick Wardley if I had to pick someone, but I was like, I can't pick a winner, and I was right. Obviously, it was a draw, so unfortunately, I didn't back the draw. That's always good odds, but no, it's a fantastic fight. Some serious toughness showed by both men. Some serious heart, because like I said to you last night, they both, if they had lesser hearts, they both wanted out at one point, or would have wanted out at one point. But so much on the line, and credit to both men.
Andy, you've been ringside for some pretty good fights yourself over the course of the last however many years. Sorry, it's late. It's not late. So anyway, so it's going to be a lot of this today. So get used to it. Where does that rank for you in fights that you've covered?
I mean, it's up towards the top because it just had everything that you would want from a fight, and you get contests of different types, but the ones that I really enjoy are the ones where you go down the stretch and it becomes a battle of wills just as much, if not more, than it becomes a battle of skill. Because one of the things that sets boxing apart from other sports, I've always felt, but I think it's more pronounced now than it used to be, with rule changes in other sports maybe making them less of a physical battle. Boxing is still very much a physical and mental battle, and how much you want it and how deep you can dig through that fog of sheer exhaustion and not go under, even when the temptation to do so must be absolutely massive. In fights like that, in the end, really, that's what it comes down to. It can be a point of technique sometimes, because if you can just hold yours together a little bit better than the other person and land a nice, clean, well-executed punch that deep in a fight when resistance levels are low, that can finish it for you. But really, you're watching two people with very, very little left who are just fighting on instinct. It's muscle memory and instinct. And that's where the training kicks in as well. But it comes down enormously to just sheer strength of will and desire. And when you've got two people who are evenly matched in that department like they were, that's what you get. And it's amazing to watch, to be honest. Fabio, I'd say after 8 rounds, looked like he was on the brink of collapsing almost at times. But then he would just always find something. And he was always dangerous, and he stayed dangerous right until the end. And they literally punched themselves to a standstill, the pair of them. Frazer collapsed after the final bell after putting in that final attack, which on another night might have been enough to knock somebody out, because that was a good, well-delivered shot. He caught him with the right hand that put him back into the ropes, Fabio Wardley, but he managed to stay on his feet. And the fact that there was one knockdown in that fight was pretty amazing, really, when you think about it.
Chris, I think the fight itself had several ebbs and flows and lots of shifts in momentum. Let's start in the early rounds. Felt like Frazer Clarke, the lead hand game was working nicely for him, stepping in behind that jab and really caused Fabio Wardley a lot of problems, particularly one big problem across his nose.
Yeah, I mean, very early on, Frazer was landing the jab, and I was sort of the angle I had. I could see, Fabio was sort of facing us, and you could see a sort of realization on his face, like, that's a hard jab, like, I don't know, like, and he took him all night, and that you could see that, like, sometimes jabs are like the shot that almost not buzz you the most, but shock you the most, because you don't always expect them to be really weighty, but they come out quick, they come out from an angle where you don't see it as much because of the position of the hands. You don't see a twist or a rotation, it just comes from here and it just comes straight out. So from there, like, he's just been hit with it, maybe when he's delivering his own jab as well. So, and there was like a shudder because of the weight. You've got 19.5 stone behind that jab, and it's coming out quick and sharp. And yeah, there was like, hit him. Obviously, the nose really looked nasty from early on, and that seemed like a massive weapon for Frazer. But and he used it well throughout the fight. It sort of dwindled a little bit. I think he could have probably jabbed a bit more, but because it was causing so many problems. But yeah, that was the jab was a key shot for Frazer.
Just on the nose, I know you've had your fair share of, as I mentioned earlier, dust-ups where you haven't come out of things looking, as pristine as you did when you went in there. I don't know if you've ever had something similar to that, or the nose has gone in your fights. But what's it like when you're dealing with something like that in such a brutal fight? Well,
I had that cut against that exact cut against Richard just across the bridge of the nose, but it was tiny. Like, nothing like that. I don't even know if it's bleeding throughout the fight. I think it got dealt with well in the corner, but yeah, I mean, I remember my nose every time I sparred George, who used to make my nose bleed with his jab, and it's uncomfortable when blood's pouring in from your nose. But I'm not sure if Fabio's was pouring like from his nostrils. It was like from the cut, so very different. Never had anything like that. It would just look like that section of his face was just red with, just claret with blood. And probably would have affected his breathing as well. It looked like he was, mouth breathing quite a lot and gasping quite a lot, probably because of that and the nature of the fight. But yeah, a brutal cut, and for our sake as viewers, glad it got to carry on.
Andy, we spoke, not you because you weren't here, but we me, Barry, none of you guys, me, Barry and Deck, spoke about Frazer Clarke's seasoning, and obviously the fact that he has WSB experience, and much was made about his amateur experience, and it looked as though in those first few rounds, kind of what we maybe anticipated would happen early on did happen. And with that being said, it was imperative for Fabio Wardley to make that breakthrough in the 5th round.
I think so, yeah. I think so. I would have given Frazer the majority of those first 4. I thought the 3rd, maybe Fabio could have won that one, but Frazer definitely did start well, and those fundamentals were serving him well. And people may well look at it, and I feel like Chris is right. He could probably have jabbed more, but just keeping up that jab, the work rate with the jab, that in itself is taxing, particularly in that weight division. And Fabio needed to find a way past it, and he's got this strange slingy right hand that he can throw from almost anywhere. His hand can be in almost any position, and he kind of lassos it in around the back of the guard, and it does some real damage. He's quite unpredictable, quite difficult to read in lots of different ways. He was difficult to read towards the end because he looked completely done, when actually somehow he wasn't. And again, that's not all that easy to deal with, I wouldn't imagine. But the knockdown was big for him, definitely. And that for me meant that at halfway, it was almost like the second half of the fight we were starting again, because it was that close. It was just terrific to watch, wasn't it? It was just terrific to watch, it really was. And it's quite amazing, really, how good Wardley is, considering how little boxing that he's had. The seasoning conversation going into it, I understood it, and Fabio had more pro fights, and he'd boxed for titles, and like Chris mentioned, he'd been clipped and been hurt and come back, and he survived rough passages and stuff like that. But no one had been really deep into a grueler, because he'd been into the 7th, Fabio, against David Adelaide, but no deeper than that. Frazer had done 10. But against Marius Vac, who wasn't really trying to win, although it was a really, really hot night, I think that would have done him some good. But
different type of
it was uncharted territory for the pair of them once you got into that back end where, they were running on fumes for a good few minutes.
Chris, just your thoughts on that, really, just to kind of follow up on what Andy said there about Fabio Wardley. Of course, yourself boxed at a high level as an amateur. How impressed are you with what Fabio Wardley's been able to do so far? He's only had 18 pro fights. How impressed are you with what he's done?
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't say I boxed at that high level as an amateur.
A higher level than the white collar.
A higher level than white collar, but nowhere near what Frazer did. It's really impressive, and it goes to show that the pro game's a different sport, because people talk about amateur pedigree all the time, and the white collar game, like a white collar fight amateur, like, they're different, and they are different, but they're different in their fields. If you're a 4-round white collar fighter and you're fighting a 4-round amateur boxer, more than likely you're going to lose to the amateur boxer. But you're now in a different sport completely in pro boxing, where it's 12 rounds. You have to be super tough. You have to have a lot of attributes which you might not need in both of those other disciplines in terms of white collar and amateur. But you've got both of them coming in polar opposites, and they produced one of the best fights. Maybe because of the stage of Frazer's career. Maybe if he'd had the career that Fabio had and Fabio had only had 8 fights, it might have been different. But that's the beauty of boxing. It brings them together. Really good to see that it shows how different a sport it is. Talking about my amateur, I mean, how I box as an amateur and how I box now is completely different. And I wouldn't have won anything if I carried on boxing how I did as an amateur. So it's really important to know that it's a different sport, and you can't rest on your laurels when it comes to amateur background and stuff. And another thing on Frazer's jab, like, he was getting caught over the top of the jab, so maybe that's why he stopped throwing it. He's moving around to his left a lot, and jabbing, Frazer was, and then getting caught. We're big fans of both guys in the gym, but like, we were like, Frazer needs to move to his right here. Like, if he moves to his right and jabbed, you're going to take that right hand away from Fabio. But and he did a little bit at times, but I think that was sort of a game plan, something in his game plan which could have definitely been improved. Moving to your right a lot more. Maybe that was just to touch on that, a reason why he stopped throwing it as much, because that was when he's getting nailed with that big right hand.
Andy, somewhat contentious point deduction as well for a low blow for Frazer Clarke. We've spoken about this many times in the past with regards to kind of the referee and sort of, they can take a point kind of here, there, and whenever it's at the referee's discretion. Much more succinct. What was your view on the point deduction?
Well, he came over Howard Foster when he took the point, and he held up 3 fingers to him as if to indicate, this is the 3rd time I've spoken to you about it. Not that there's any kind of 3 strikes and a point goes rule, because there isn't, as you just said. But he was, that suggested to me that, look, we've spoken about this. I have warned you, and now a point's going to go. I didn't hear those warnings, but they must have happened. And Frazer didn't really complain about it, to be honest. So I feel like Howard Foster probably did the right thing if he'd issued those warnings. It was post-knockdown, wasn't it? So maybe it was round 8?
7 or 8 or
7
something.
or 8, I think, yeah.
I can find my scorecard. I haven't plugged the app yet.
But it wasn't a solid blow. It was just a little dig on the inside as he was waiting for the referee to break them out of a clinch, really.
Yeah.
And it landed on the belt line, and Fabio's shorts were where they should be. So the belt was sitting on the protector, so that is a foul. But at that stage of the fight, you're thinking to yourself, wow, like that could be really important, because a point is a point. I thought that Frazer probably won that round, which would essentially, when you take the point off at the end, would have made it a 9-9. Obviously, people tie themselves in knots when it comes to scoring point deductions. And all you do is you just score the round without it, and then you take the point off at the end. When you've got your scorecard, it's as simple as that, really, because it's something that happens.
The point almost comes off at the end of the fight, doesn't
it?
Yeah.
It's something that happens outside of the 3 minutes of the round, because they'll literally take time out, take the point, and then start the time again. It's not the same as as scoring a knockdown. Yeah. So it's actually really straightforward to deal with. But it wasn't ideal by any stretch. But the lack of complaint from Frazer and the signal from Howard Foster made me think that, although I hadn't really heard those warnings myself, that it was kind of fair enough.
Do we have any idea on the scorecards, like what that round was scored by the judges?
No, I haven't seen
the cards. No. But that'd be an interesting one to have a look at.
Yeah, because if a judge goes and then scores it to Fabio, which I don't know.
And he's got 2 10-8s.
Yeah, 2 10-8 rounds, which obviously swings the fight massively.
Yeah, I scored that round for Clarke, so I had that 9-9 round when taking the point off. But yeah, that is one of the swings. And Frazer Clarke in the post-fight press conference talked about Wardley being sort of admonished a few times for hitting with the back of the glove, and obviously didn't have a point taken there. There was certainly no blame. And as disappointed as Frazer Clarke was, I think he was kind of, he was, he should have been there.
It's a reasonable point to make, that.
Yeah, of course. Particularly when in his opinion he had a point taken.
It was that deep in the fight, those couple of backhanders from Fabio. I don't think he even knew he was
It's just exhaustion.
Yeah. It's just habit.
But it's an illegal blow, but there's nothing intentional about it.
Are we happy with the draw? It's
always a bit of a letdown, the draw, isn't it? Let's be honest. But I think in terms of the fairness of it, I feel like it was fair. But it's just unsatisfying a draw, isn't it? Because Chris was saying when we were just over the road in the cafe, is that it's a weird one for Frazer Clarke, because he has finished equal first in the British title fight. So that means you are good enough to win a British title, but he's not a British champion. And having put that titanic effort in, that's going to be quite hard to take, I think. Whereas for Fabio, maybe it'll be a bit easier because he's the champ and he's won that title, and he will forever be a British champion. That will never not have happened. So I think it's probably an easier one for him to get over, to be honest.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's something that Frazer Clarke said in the press conference afterwards. I put to him, I'm sure you're very disappointed. We could all see how disappointed he was. But do you are you proud that you've been involved in a genuine modern classic for the British title? And he sort of politely said, not really, because I want to win. I wanted to win the belts, wanted to bring the belts home. I'm sure in time that will come, but at the minute I'm devastated, which you can absolutely understand. It's got to be the rematch. We've got to have a rematch, surely rematch. Got to be a rematch.
Yeah, I mean they'll order it, won't they? I'd have thought.
Well, maybe, yeah, but it's a weird one because a rematch will create a huge amount of hype because they've got a highlight reel, 12 rounds of phenomenal highlights, but it's not going to be as good as the first fight. Like
it can't be.
No, that's my point. Like it can't be as good. So then there's going to be that disappointment. How much did it? And if it is anywhere near as good, none of them are going to box again. Yeah. Like that's taken like a lot of. That would have taken. That's a lot of miles on the clock in that one fight. I was just kept turning around to people and be like, this is some fight. And early on as well, even midway through the fight. And I like both guys, and I don't want to see him take beatings like that again. And yeah, like Andy said, like it almost would have been better for Frazer, I think, to have lost, because then you get that kick. Like, okay, like I boxed okay and did well, but I've got a few, ironing outs to do. But it's like, well, no, I was good enough. So then you sometimes miss the ironing outs. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
The mistakes, because you're like, I was so close. Like, I just got to go and do it again and just tweak a tiny thing, rather than, right, if I just put another monumental effort into the developing and all that.
Get deducted a point, and he
yeah, that's it. And it's minor things, and that's what happens a lot of time in those sort of fights. But yeah, it's a weird one. I want to see the fight as a boxing fan. I want to watch that fight back again, fresh, without it happening already, if that makes sense. Yeah. But I don't want to see either guy go through that again, because it's brutal. They're good blokes, and it's a savage sport. I mean, the public are going to want to see it again, but I'll be surprised if either guy wants to go through that again.
What do you think, Andy?
I pretty much agree with Chris, I think, because I'm more and more aware of this, I think, the longer I stay in this business and do the job that we're all doing, which is that although those fights are amazing for our entertainment, fighters leave a big piece of themselves in the ring after that.
Yeah.
And you can only do that at the most a handful of times. And
a handful of times at heavyweight is different than a handful of times at lighter weight.
Sure.
We've seen it once, and it was absolutely amazing. But I don't mind if we don't see it again. If they decide to do different things, I don't mind. I would understand, because the chances are, like you said, the rematch. I mean, how can it be as good as that? It's just not. It's just not possible. And it's funny because fighters, in a way, if they're made for it, they all want to be in a fight like that to show people that they can do it. But once you've had one, you don't want another one, do you? You don't want another one. I remember talking to George about this a while ago and just saying, surely you get to a point where you know that you are prepared to do whatever it takes to win. And you will push it to that nth degree, to the point where, you are prepared to die in there, because that's not a decision you get to make. It's not like somebody comes up to you in the corner before a round and says, if you keep pushing it like this, then you're going to die in the next round. It's not that black and white. What they're saying when they say that is, I'm prepared to just keep pushing and pushing and pushing until I can push no more. And in this sport, that can mean, we don't need to say it. But once you've done it once, you don't want to ever have to do it again. You know that you can do it, but you don't want to do it. We don't have to do it. So it's easy for us to watch it and think, wow, that was absolutely brilliant, particularly if you watch it on TV, because watching any sport on TV, it appears a bit more like a computer game, and you don't really understand what's happening when these massive blows are landing on people. And then when you watch it from ringside, you think to yourself, yeah.
That was one of those fights where, obviously I haven't watched it back. I will watch it back at some point. But being there, you're starting to see stuff flying out of people and blood everywhere, and it really is different when you're seeing a fight like that up close. It really does give it that
people
different,
that big when
men.
they all of a sudden look
Barry
really
says
vulnerable.
about it sometimes. You hear that noise of the big men when they throw down together. Somebody said earlier, is Frazer Clarke, do you have to question his power if he couldn't get rid of Fabio Wardley? I was like, I think you just have to look at Fabio Wardley's chin and his durability. He was getting hit with some big shots. You could hear those shots at ringside thudding off him. Like you said about the jab as well. They're not little jab. He's not flicking those jabs. He's stepping
those
right in behind.
Well.
Yeah, he couldn't miss him with the right uppercut.
The uppercuts from early on were a big sign of how tough Fabio is, because he was cats with flush head was getting knocked.
And
right
it's funny,
back.
like those ones visually, they always really register with me. They kind of make me wince, because you see that upward movement of the head and the juddering nature of it, and you just think, wow, that has got to really take it out.
It's really pronounced for judges and spectators, isn't it?
You think about like, remember when Josh Taylor boxed Ramirez and he hit him with that uppercut, dropped him. Like, it was like that. I'm like half expecting Fabio to just drop to his knees, because they just go boom on the inside, and then dropped it, and he just wasn't dropping. Like, he was maybe clinching, but seemed pretty clear-eyed after it and stuff like that. Just phenomenal chin.
Who takes more from last night? A lot was kind of made before the fight about, who was more experienced and yada, yada, yada. Who takes more?
I actually think it's the opposite. I think it's who's lost less.
Yeah.
I think that's taken a lot out of both fighters. For some reason, I feel like it's taken more out of Frazer. I don't know whether it's because it seemed like he was affected more by the bigger shots that Fabio was throwing, and Fabio was getting hit more, it seemed, but less, not as big and not as clean. I think only time will tell with that, and they need a good rest and then get back in it. But it's a hard one because you can rest. Like Frazer can go and rest, but can't have a blowout and celebrate because there's nothing to celebrate. Like as a fighter, a draw's not. You can't celebrate a draw. No matter, you can celebrate your performance and things like that. And
you can take pride.
Yeah, but you're never gonna be able to celebrate. But you also can't get back in the gym soon because you need a good rest. So it's a hard one. He's probably going to put on some weight and stuff, but you need to stay long-term motivated and have that goal in sight when you're having a rest, and do a bit of, swimming and whatever it is, and just keep the body moving, keep as fresh as you can after a few weeks, because otherwise you get into a slump and then you come back into your next fight and it might not be a massive fight. And you're not going to have that same motivation that you're going to have for a British title fight against a rival. It got made into a rivalry, obviously, because of the purse bids and all that. And then you don't want to come into that fight nearly 21 stone or whatever and have a flat performance, because then you've lost that momentum from that amazing fight. So, I think it's very much one of them where time will tell and who's lost the least.
I really want to see the rematch. I understand, and maybe it's the sleep deprived nature of me not having the empathy or whatever for Frazer and Fabio, but I think the rematch is massive. I think it's the biggest fight for both men.
Yeah, and that's probably why
it is. I just can't see how a fight that is that good, that doesn't have a conclusive winner.
I'm not saying that I don't want to see it again.
Oh, of course, I know what you're saying.
But I do want to see it again, but in these circumstances, I would just... Normally, I would be fuming if we didn't see it again, but because of what it was like, I would be okay with it if we didn't see it again. But I would prefer to see it again.
If we didn't see it again, where does each one go?
That's a good question. And that's why it probably will happen, because Frazer, as Chris explained, will feel like I have reached that level. If one point had gone the other way and I'd been announced as the winner, then I could feel like I've beaten a really good British champion there. Now I can look onwards. But can I? Because I didn't actually win. It's a confusing space to be in, that, I think. And for Fabio, he would want to look onwards and upwards too. But in the heavyweight division, what does that look like for him off the back of that fight? It's hard, in terms of what their next step would be if it's not going to be each other. I don't really know. Is the honest answer.
What do you think, Chris?
Yeah, the only thing, I mean, Fabio's sort of, there's a big gap. I can't remember who I was explaining it to. I think it was Kane last night. Like the gap between domestic level and there's world level. There's nothing really in between. Like you've got those massive names like on the big heavyweight cards in Saudi and whatever, and then you've got like the guys last night, and it's like they're not ready for that. Like a big Baby Miller or someone like that, it would seem. And so I don't, who is there for Fabio? I'm not really. I mean, I'm not
sort of
the
European level guys like your Caballos and stuff.
Yeah,
have now gone a bit higher. That's what I mean. They're now at the
a
world
good
level.
win he had last time.
Really, he had a great win last
and
time.
And that kind of in between British and like the European level hasn't really been bolstered. Really,
No.
it's kind of waiting for that next one to follow up. Isn't
and
it?
he's not going to fight. I forgot that guy's name. Who Caballero beat. Makhmudov. Yeah, he's not going to fight him. Like Fabio's not going to go and fight that guy. So like who is there? Frazer, you'd need, like, if he wasn't to fight him, he'd fight someone like a David Alale.
Yeah.
But he's not going to fight him because he's with Queensberry, and it's probably just not going to happen unless Fabio vacated and then a fight like that got made for British.
That could happen, couldn't it?
Yeah, that's
a possibility.
Yeah, and that's the sort of fight that Fabio could probably take pride from last night and experience from last night and put that into another solid camera. Okay, now I can announce myself as against Adelaide, and Adelaide will probably want that sort of, he wants to put right the last fight, so it'd be a decent fight. You'd be happy as a spectator if last night hadn't happened, if that fight was happening. So yeah, I think that's the only option. I can't think of anything for Fabio other than Frazer, really. But yeah, it's a tough one.
It's gonna be interesting to see how it pans out. But what a fight! A British title classic.
And to all the keyboard warriors out there, remember last night's fight, how you loved it, and shut up because fighters give their all.
There he goes, the gentleman. Someone's put 50p in the gentleman today.
It's a bank holiday Monday. I'm having the day off.
It's good stuff, mate. We like that here. We're all about that. Yeah. Okay, right. We're going to move on and talk about some of the rest of the card. Andy, going to come to you first for a big win for Chris Kongo over Florian Marku. It's a fight that's been kind of talked about, and I've certainly looked forward to for many, many years. And we finally got there, and it felt like, albeit Chris Kongo was, I think, the slight betting underdog going into the fight, kind of went how it maybe should have gone on paper a little bit. Would that be fair to say?
Yeah, I felt like what we may well get would be a fight where Kongo, who's definitely the better boxer technically, would be ahead at halfway, but Marku would just keep rolling forward, would get to him in the second half of the fight, and things would get very interesting. But that isn't what happened, because Kongo just dominated from the beginning, and he kept that work rate high, and his conditioning was really good. He did fade a bit in the second half against Eko Esserman, but Esserman is a really good fighter, and he's called the Engine for a reason, and he brings that pressure in a better, more educated way than Marku was able to last night, and that's what allowed him to overhaul Kongo, and that just didn't happen last night. I thought he boxed really, really well, Chris Kongo. And he needed that because his two previous big fights against McKinson and then Eko, he lost. So if he lost again, that would have been it for him, I think, really, at the level that he wants to box at. And he took care of business. He really did. Marku's always been an interesting one for me because, I mean, how good is he? We don't. I think maybe we know now off the back of last night. But prior to that, he'd had some good wins, but he struggled a bit in other performances, and it was difficult to get a real handle on him, to be honest. And he just couldn't really get to Kongo, who kept it. He didn't just keep it long either. He was exchanging on the inside, particularly towards the end, and just grew more and more as the fight went on. He got better and better and better as the rounds progressed, and I think T. Marku would have been thinking that the opposite would happen, but it just didn't.
Bit scrappy at times, wasn't it, in there?
Yeah, a little bit.
I felt like Kongo was doing a bit of holding and Marku was doing a lot of hitting behind the back of the head.
Yeah, he did,
and
the point went in the end. Yeah. And the referee was good. He was strict with a pair of them, and he told them both at the same time after a few rounds, you, no more hitting around the back of the head. You, no more holding. And Kongo then basically just kind of stopped doing it. He did it in the early stages to get himself out of corners and stuff like that. He'd grab him by the waist and it's almost like a little dance move, just span him around. But then when the referee got on him about it, he stopped doing it because he realised it served its purpose by then, hadn't it? And he didn't really need to do it anymore.
Yeah, he was. I mean, some of the holding early on was. I was like, he can't keep this up. This is giving me flashbacks. It was a. And I was, but he to be in his, to be fair to me, he did definitely tame it down and did it a couple of times, but it was very much more like. Marku he just looked like he was just looking for one big shot. He'd never put any shots together, and this guy's moving non-stop. You're not just going to land one big shot. Like, it's just not going to happen. And that's the difference between Eko and Marku. Like, Eko was educated pressure, would jab his way in. He wouldn't just go warm, look, he'd get his way in and then he'd work. And that's why he sort of broke Chris down through the fight and took over in the second half of the fight. Whereas Marku just looked for one shot throughout. And they even said it in the build-up, right? He said, after 3 or 4 rounds, that's it.
So after 2 rounds, you're not going to be seeing nothing, brother. That's what he said.
Okay.
Something like that as well. You go back a bit with Chris Kongo, don't you? Obviously, you spent a lot of time in the gym sparring Josh Taylor, and of course, obviously on GB. Good to see, as Andy mentioned there, good to see him get over the line in a big fight.
Yeah, I like Chris. He's been against me in a lot of corners. I feel like he's been against me in the Richard corner, the Isaac corner, and I'm sure he'll be against me again in the Richard corner in the next fight. But it's he's a good lad. We always got a lot of respect for each other. He spent a little bit of time in our gym. It was nice to see him get that, and you can see how much it meant to him at the end as well, and the whole team.
Where does he go next, Andy? Chris Kongo?
I feel like if I were him, I would want to try and win that British title that he wasn't far away from winning against Esserman. Harry Scarf's got that at the minute, hasn't he? And it's quite an interesting scene at the weight. So I don't know what his plans are, whether that's on the list or whether he wants to try and push on in a different direction. But that was a big win for him, and I think it'll give him a lot of confidence because he's always been a good fighter. I remember first seeing him down at Miguel's with Richard and Isaac, and he just turned pro at that point. And
Ted Bammy stable.
Yeah, and you could see that he was good. And he's always wanted the big fights, but having not got over the line, that's going to do something to you. But now he has. You could see someone really grow from that. I mean, I'd like to see him target that British title. I
think Harry Scarf's going to box Karen Chikedzian for a final eliminator for a certain Jaron Ennis's IBF World Welterweight title. So interesting to see what happens with that British welterweight title.
I think he'll be in. I imagine he'll be in line for it, like around that.
Yeah.
Off the back of that win.
You'd think.
Who else? I mean, Echo's still there.
Yeah, McKinson's still there. Obviously, McKinson had a win over him. We have not seen too much. I mean, I know he's boxed a couple of times, but we've not seen too much from him since that Virgil Ortiz fight. That could be a fight that could happen again. Kongo McKinson too. McKinson Kongo too. Good win for Chris Kongo. Anyway, moving on. Where are we going to go next? Let's go with the cruiserweight division. Chris, going to come to you first because you know a thing or two about the cruiserweight division.
I am the cruiserweight division.
You are the cruiserweight division. Here he is. Not according to DAZN, though. Shout out to the DAZN graphics guy. You're fired. You're shit at your job. Anyway, I'm not joking. Anyway, Vidal Riley against Mikel Lawal. Vidal Riley, of course, former amateur foe of yourself, and Mikel Lawal, obviously somebody who's been in McGuigan's gym, sparring and whatnot. I felt, a pretty routine, comprehensive decision win for Vidal Riley, but admittedly not perhaps the statement that he may have wanted to make.
I feel like he knew it was going to be like that sort of fight. That's the way he boxed throughout. But I mean, it didn't look during the fight like he wanted to make a statement. Apart from a couple of counter right hands, he didn't really look like. And look, Mikel can punch, but it's you feel like there could have been more from Vidal, and I feel like there is a lot more that he can give. I know how talented he is. I've seen him, obviously watched him in a few fights, shared the ring with him in the amateurs. Hear really good stories about him sparring certain people, and I feel like there's more. There's just something missing. It's just like you just want him just to let loose, show, like give everything. So if there is any vulnerabilities, show them. But it's almost like he's, I'm not saying he has vulnerabilities in terms of a chin or engine or anything like that, but just let us see him. Like, we haven't seen him yet, and I think that's kind of what people want to see now. They want to see a little bit like the Ben Whittaker fight, whereas Ben got hit a few times, and people probably like, okay, that's good because I've seen him get hit now. Whereas like you haven't seen Vidal probably take a shot. I mean, kind of did in the Anis Taj fight, but not that you want to. From a coach's point of view, you want him to go and just hang your chin out. But you know what I mean? Like, just take a few risks. And that's what his dad was saying in the corner, be brave. And I guess that's kind of what, from my point of view, I would like to see a little bit more of, is be a bit braver and push the fight a little bit more, push the pace a little bit more. But and then Mikel was, I think he looked more comfortable in the ring than he did against Isaac. To begin with, was jabbing quite well. Probably could have jabbed a lot more, and could have let his hands go a little bit more. But very difficult when a guy's just moving the entire fight.
Andy, what did you make of Vidal Riley's performance?
I think overall, you would have to say that it was a good performance because he took care of business and he was very, very disciplined. Physically, he was up to the job, which wasn't easy because he demanded a lot of himself. And mentally, concentration levels have got to stay really high. So the discipline's got to be there from that point of view as well, because there would have been a temptation to set your feet when you know that you're probably ahead and look for the big finish when you didn't really need one. We've seen fighters do that down the years and things go terribly, terribly wrong. It just wasn't the most mesmerising fight to watch for that reason, but it's not always going to be. I did feel like after 4 rounds, this could get really interesting in the second half because I thought Lawal had a decent 4th round, not a big round win or anything like that, but he just looked to me like he was getting a little bit closer and beginning to cope a little bit better with the movement, and that Vidal was maybe starting to feel it because he was working hard. And I was wrong about that, as it turned out, because he managed to sustain that throughout the fight, and Lawal never quite figured out how to cut off those exits, how to pin him down. So yeah, I mean, it wasn't the most enthralling watch that we've had, this year. But at the same time, it is about winning and moving on to that next level. I did find it quite interesting. We went into the corner, I think, before the start of the final round, and his trainer Derek, was kind of asking him to set his feet a bit more, sink the punches in, and go for that kind of more dominant finish, or try and dominate a bit more. And Kerry Kayes kind of just chimed in very discreetly, experienced guy, knows how a corner works. He's not the main voice, but chimed in, basically saying, but still be elusive. So he's basically saying that the older guy there is basically saying, but we've won the fight, let's not go crazy. So I found that quite interesting, that dynamic. Maybe Derek Riley did feel like he could have just been a bit bolder, and Kerry Kayes is thinking, not now though, because we've got 1 round left.
Yeah, I think as well, if you've done that in a massive title fight, a British title fight, and you just go and outbox the champion or something like that, then fine. Like, you get this just about winning. But I think it wasn't just about winning. I mean, obviously that's the main thing. But if it was like a world title fight, someone goes box like that, you can never argue because they win a world title. But yeah, I don't know. I'm also a sucker for entertainment. So
It's sort of, when you're looking back at last night's show, kind of every fight that we've ever seen is going to pale into insignificance compared to the main event, isn't it?
We didn't know it at the time.
No, of course not. I thought it was a very worthwhile outing for Vidal Riley. I think he won the fight pretty much in second gear, which can be a good thing or a bad thing, and obviously we need to see those gears moving forward. But I mean, as you all know, and certainly people who have shared the ring with Mikhail Lawal know, he can punch. And, his only real chance of winning the fight, isn't it, is if you stand there and give an opportunity. Because with respect to Lawal, his feet, again, were really poor last night. He had no way of closing the ring off for Vidal Riley and cutting the ring down. And for Riley, getting those rounds in against a guy who, we've said this previously, and obviously meaning no disrespect to David Jamieson, but, a British champion, but not the higher level British champion, I think it's fair to say. On paper at least, that is still a very good result, if not, again, I think I tweeted some words to the effect of it wasn't quite Hagler Hearns, but it was a worthwhile outing for Vidal Riley, I felt.
No, and you don't want to have a Hagler Hearns if you don't need to. Yeah. It's what we were talking about before, and on paper, basically, he's won comfortably against a very recent British champion. Happy days. If he's going to want to click up a level, then that allows him to do it. He's kind of achieved that credential, if you like.
But I just feel like they're the sort of fights where you need to, like, it's all good and well being on paper, but when it comes to actual stock and what it's going to do for your career in terms of progressing you as a fighter and ticking off experiences. He could have done that 100 times. He could have done that against 20 Mikhail Lawals and be 20-0, but it's not going to prepare him for anything. It's not. You're not gaining any experience there. Like, you can do it. You can do it once, but he knew he could do that. Like, that's the thing. And boxing at that stage of your career is important to show yourself and for the brand and the entertainment, etc. And show other people that you can do more and you can go through rough patches. I'm not saying you have to, like go through a war, but just look to force the fight. Like you could have beaten him other ways, is what I'm saying, and looked better doing it. And that's, I guess, what we want to see from him, because we're being promised a lot from Vidal with his exposure that he brings and all the fans he brings and viewers he brings. So I guess you just want to see more.
Where next for Vidal Riley, Andy? I think at the end of the fight there was a triple threat match at ringside between Vidal Riley, Isaac Chamberlain and Chev Clarke. Chev Clarke's like the one running down with a steel chair towards the end of it.
It was a shame that
I really didn't like it. I'm old-fashioned with stuff like that. I don't like stuff like that.
No, but I heard that Chev wasn't actually doing anything.
No, they're all as bad as each other.
No, but
other people got involved.
That's
people.
what I don't like.
Yeah,
I don't like if it's fighters arguing. Like, fighters are animals. Sorry, but like, and it can happen, can't it? But when you've got the shut up, man.
That was the problem, because what was a really kind of promising and quite organic little situation was just brewing nicely there, because obviously Isaac came over and Isaac's got plenty to say and he put it on Vidal a bit, and that was getting slightly uncomfortable in a good way. And then Chev was there as well, because he's been mandated to box Isaac for the British, and he was on his way down, and he would have got that right if he'd just been allowed to go over there and have a chat. But other people getting involved, and all of a sudden,
I don't know if it is one of Chev's mates mentioned
whoever it was. It just doesn't look. And then when you get the melee, when the camera starts moving and the melee happens, I don't.
I think you just blame Andy Scott for saying that Chev was there. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Just chuck Andy Scott under
the bus. I mean, that's my go-to generally. As long as people understand that I'm not him,
which is an ongoing issue.
But yeah, it's. I said to Vidal years ago when I came in for a podcast review and we were passing, like, oh, mate, get involved in this cruiserweight scene. It's flying in Britain. Like, it's the best scene cruiserweights we've ever had, like, in terms of how evenly matched everyone is and the ability there. And it's exciting. He was like, yeah, like, I'm going to take my time. And, like, he's taken his time. It was many years ago now, and he's in it. There's all three of those guys. There's Chev, there's Isaac, there's Vidal. There's so many good cruiserweights in Britain, and they're sort of that domestic level because they haven't had all the experiences yet that they, you need to get up. And then there's a couple of us at world level, so it's exciting. But I mean, I'm just glad I'm not part of that drama. I just sit quietly. Apart from today, I'm all for it.
I was going to say it's on smoke today, on bank holidays only. But yeah, I thought it was. I thought it was a decent enough performance from Vidal Riley. Interested to see where he does go next, though. We spoke about this in the past, haven't we? Where sort of Isaac Chamberlain. Well, although it seems as though that fight does interest him. Obviously, we saw last night, but he had the opportunity to box for the European.
That's gone very quiet. Is there no real interest in him doing that?
I think that all the talk is Vidal and Isaac. Yeah, exactly. From what I've heard.
If you're in the Chamberlain business,
he's going to have to vacate that British title though if he does that, Chamberlain.
Well, I think, and then I wonder, is that gonna annoy Vidal because he's saying he wants the British, and then it's like, well,
so if Vidal, I don't think wants to fight Isaac Chamberlain. He wants to fight for the British title.
Right? Yeah, and off the back of defending his English title and it being against a former British champion, surely he would be next for the winner of.
Yeah, and then you could imagine, let's for argument's sake, when we get into the super hypotheticals, Isaac Chamberlain vacates the British, the board orders Chev Clarke against Vidal Riley for the British, and someone pulls out the purse bid. Like, you can see it coming a mile off, can't you? Unfortunately, one of my favourite comments on Twitter last night was like, Ben Shalom pulled the power as soon as Chev Clarke went onto the microphone. I like that one. But anyway, moving on and talk about the final fight from last night's card before we talk about Saturday's cards and then Friday. Your mate, Ben Whittaker, went the distance with Leon Willings in a fight that I actually really enjoyed. Your thoughts on things, Andy? You had an interesting week with young Benzo, didn't you?
Yeah, I did. I generally found the whole thing and the kind of reaction to it kind of fascinating, although not altogether unexpected. I've had plenty of conversations with Ben Whittaker, and they've been perfectly civil. But every now and again, you will say something that a fighter doesn't like. I'm absolutely aware of that. And I have absolutely no problem whatsoever with a fighter bringing that to my doorstep in the right way. And I thought he did do it in the right way. Nobody raised their voice. No one called each other any names. He shook my hand at the end. Yeah, it was a bit touchy, and it was real. He said what he wanted to say. I stood my ground. More of that, in a sense. It's good interaction, and it was, it got people talking. It was kind of good TV, if you like. But also, I do think that back and forth is a good thing. I don't think we should have a situation where you have this dynamic where fighters who are almost always the younger men are talked about by commentators or whoever else who are maybe 15, 20 years older, and they feel like they can't really say anything back. That's not... What is that? It should be...
That's the problem of the world, not just boxing. It's conversations, isn't it? Like, people are too scared to say something to a family member, whatever it may be. Someone is doing something wrong, they don't want to speak up on it or whatever. And
that can harbour resentment, can't it?
Yeah.
And got it out there in the open.
Yeah.
And very much so, live on Sky Sports. You can't get more out there in the open than that.
I wasn't expecting it. I didn't know that he'd taken umbrage at it. How would I know? We're not... we see each other every now and again. I don't think it was necessarily a plan he had. It just, there I am, and he decided, okay, let's do it now.
Are you light heavyweight is what I want to know, Andy?
Yeah,
a touch over, but I could do it.
Okay,
what you should have done is at the end, before when he went to shake your hand, you should have given him a boop on the top of the head.
So lots of people have said that to me. But the handshake at the end for me was crucial.
Yeah, of course.
Because
it looked like he might not as well, didn't it?
It did.
He did like the Cristiano Ronaldo, Gary Neville
like
stuff.
He might not. And I was thinking to myself, oh, please don't do this, Ben, because that will make you look bad.
Should give him one of those.
And so we had the handshake, and but afterwards, of course, everything's very binary now. It's like who was right and who was wrong. Nobody was right or wrong. He gave his side, I gave mine, and that's that. I've got no problem with it. I never have had. I've said this to fighters myself, when I've got a sense that there might be something where they're maybe just a little bit off, and I think, and I've said to them sometimes, is there something going on here? Or you got something you want to say to me? Because you can say it, Craig Richards has done it a couple of times. But Craig didn't need any encouragement.
While we're on it, Andy, you called my fight against Richard.
This is it. Like, I'm not aware of having said anything that you've taken. No,
he's been waiting for years. He's finally got his chance.
But Bank Holiday Monday.
but if you had, then I would have liked to think that you would have thought, look, Andy Clarke seems like a reasonable bloke. I could probably go and see him with it.
I would.
And that's basically. That's the long and short of it for me. It's really as simple as that. But yeah, everybody is kind of like, what do you think about this? Are you team this? Are you team? It's like it was just two adults having a conversation about something. And with regard to what he was saying to me, during that fight, we were almost kind of debating where the borderline is between respect and disrespect, me and Macklin and whoever else was doing the fight with us. And from memory, what I said was, well, tapping him on the top of the head like that, for me, that is disrespectful. And the reason I would say that is because it's a rules thing, basically. All the movement and all the rest of it, that showing off is not against the rules. And I'm not against it. It's entertaining. It is. And I enjoy seeing it. But when you foul someone, and that's what tapping them on the top of the head is, the most harmless foul ever. You're not looking to do any damage or gain any kind of advantage, but that is a foul. And the referee will do something about that. And I don't feel that an intentional foul, no matter how playful or harmless it is, that for me is you choosing to break the rules of the ring. And that's where
that's the disrespect.
Yeah, that's where the
how would you feel, Chris, if somebody boop when you're in a fight?
I just hit them.
Would you feel? Let's say you couldn't hit them, because I think that's obviously the other side to
okay. So you got someone.
That's part of the argument, isn't it? That with respect, you're not doing it against Dimitri Bivol. You know, if you're Cali Grady is not just going to be able to just hit him back, is he? And I think that's what the part of the conversation is, right?
Part of it, yeah.
Don't know.
Would you feel disrespected?
Never been
the disrespect
that outclassed. So
it could never happen to me, is what you're saying.
Headbutt on the chest and just work away. No.
Sorry, get
I guess you feel, but like I don't know. I'm quite a placid person. Things like that. Like I just take responsibility and think I should be good enough to not let that happen to me. And so far it hasn't. So, but I understand both points. I understand Ben's.
I think both points are really understandable.
And you both stand by both points, and you both had a conversation about, which is great. And I think Ben sees it as an entertainment, and he's outclassed someone, so he could do it. And he did used to do it against high-level amateurs and stuff like that in some competitions, which is irrelevant really, because this guy isn't that level. And Andy sees it as disrespectful, and that's it's an opinion. It's not a wrong or a right. It's purely based on opinion. So,
and I'm not saying it's some kind of heinous crime, and that wasn't how I said it at the time. It wasn't like, this is a disgrace. It's disrespectful. He should be banned from boxing.
When I first heard,
I don't think Andy should fight him because of it. Put it that way. Which is what the question was.
Yeah,
I think
exactly,
who are you going to fight next? And he called out Andy.
I'm pulling out of those purse bids.
Initially, my first thought was like, did he say it on the boxing show? And then it was like, he said it on Sky Sport. That's all right. That doesn't matter. Let's talk about the fight between Ben Whittaker and Leon Williams, not Ben Whittaker and Andy Clarke. Were you impressed, Chris? I felt like it was, it wasn't as straightforward as certainly some Ben Whittaker fights were, but I feel like that's what he needs, isn't it?
Yeah, and I was more impressed with Leon Williams. I thought he was
very good. Shout out Dick Taylor.
Very, very tough guy, and boxed the sort of fight that you kind of need to against Ben at that level. Like, was trying to be elusive and make him miss, and he did at times, but then also took a few heavy shots, got dropped, and everyone thought, well, I certainly did, thought it was beginning of the end. And he stuck in there and landed a few shots himself, which is probably what people want to see. The haters, if you want, for Ben Whittaker, or people want to see him take a few shots, and he did, and showboated off the back of it, and that's the entertainment that Ben brings. He's I think the biggest thing with Ben is people sort of see the showboating and all that for I don't know, just he's just a showman. Like, he grafts, you can see that, like, as a fighter, and knowing the sort of person he is, and over the years, and seeing all the work he's put in. I remember being on GB assessment, and he was there, and we were chatting and stuff then, and his reaction to this, to losing the gold medal bout at the Olympics, the mindset's there with Ben, so I just feel like allow him to do what he wants to do. At the end of the day, he's people talking about him, he's earning substantial amount of money, but as long as all that, in terms of like, that's the arc he's going to go on, he's earning loads and loads of money because he's got that profile. So hopefully he can stay with that work rate, that work ethic, and keep improving and keep doing it through the levels. And that's what you want to see. It's a tough one for Ben, because who does he fight next? And that's always, I think, until we see a sort of, not necessarily a 50-50 fight, but some sort of needle fight where there's like a few people might think that Ben might lose. Well, we might be a way off that at the moment, but a good perfect test. 7 fights, like that was his 7th fight. So what was I doing in my 7th fight? I was fighting Robin Dupree in my 7th fight in a Commonwealth title eliminator, and I certainly didn't look that good. So
Robin Dupree went like this on Chris's head.
And I was sat in York Hall on the balcony going mental about how disrespectful it
is. So look, it was a superb performance from Ben, and we saw a little bit more because of it. He's going to always showboat, but at the same time, you almost hopefully takes away some stuff where you got to learn how to break people like that down, and because he was looking for the right hand too much, and he was shoulder rolling it and dipping down to his right.
Defense was good, wasn't it?
But his defense was good to that shot. Yeah. It wouldn't have been good to a long left hook.
Yeah.
And if he didn't finish on the left hook at all. And if he had done, I think he would have got him out there. And if he finished on the left hook to the head more,
Actually,
just
I never
lifted
really
it.
noticed that, but you're absolutely right, because he didn't. It was 1-2s, 1-2s,
Yeah,
1-2s.
everything was finished on the
down
right
left
hand
to the body sometimes,
Yeah.
but not left hand to the head.
Well, I thought it was very good. And there was Leon Williams, and as the rounds went on, sort of like he was more comfortable on the ropes, and he was starting to try and catch and counter with the left hook off the rope. I thought it was very impressive with him. Actually, while the fight was going on, a big loudmouth Scouser behind me shouting really good instructions. I think, and we all know that Scouse accent's lovely. And sort of hearing that, and I turned around, Anthony Fowler there,
Yeah,
barking
I saw him in the crowd.
out the
Yeah.
orders and whatnot.
It's because of the documentary, isn't it?
Yeah, he's just getting out there now.
The stable documentary, our BBC iPlayer, on our gym. Fowler's in that, and he's that's it now. He's famous. we're all famous from that. So it was good to see Fowler. He was there.
But I was really pleased to see Leon Willings perform the way that he did,
Yeah.
because I watched his fight against
He
Jake.
could do a bit, I think.
I watched his fight against Jake Barton, and you could see that he was game. You could see that he took it very, very seriously. You could see that he had this quite unorthodox but dangerous left hand on him. But what you don't know when somebody takes a fight like that at short notice against somebody like that who's intimidating in kind of every way during fight week and also potentially on the night, you don't know how somebody's going to respond. And I saw the odd thing during the week that made me wonder whether he might freeze, because it's always a possibility. And he didn't. And the way the fight went, Whittaker started really well. I thought it was very worthwhile 8 rounds for him. He started really well, got the knockdown, and then maybe he thought this was going to be a quick job, or in the next round Willings came out and fired back a bit more, and Ben Whittaker may well have thought, okay, this is great because he's going to be a bit more open now, the finish might not be too far away. And then Willings kind of gave him a good tussle for a while, and then it was almost like he kind of had to start again, like he realised, all right, this guy's probably tougher than maybe I thought, or maybe I thought sat on my stool at the end of the first. Let's kind of start to break him down again. And it was good. It was good to watch. And we didn't see too much of the showboating. We had the odd shimmy and shake, nothing major. It could be that he kind of parks that a bit now, that it's served its purpose for him with that big boom at the start of February, because he is a bright guy. There's no question about that, I don't think. In the way that he markets himself and he understands things. And it could be that that's what he chooses to do, or he'll just do it in fights where there's an opportunity to do it, and there wasn't especially. He did it a bit at the end of the first round, and the rest of the time the man in front of him was occupying him, and so correctly he went about his business.
Yeah, it felt like it was the right amount, of showboating from Ben. Like it's become part of, that's why people watch him, because of that sort of thing, and there was like the right amount of it. But what I think, when you go up the levels, you're not. He'll do it when he makes someone miss and he's out of range, but you're not going to be able to do it as much as he has done previously, because people could be keeping you mentally occupied a lot more.
I agree, and I think last night was a potentially on the back of that massive explosion that he had profile wise after the Khalid Gradia fight. Kind of what you needed a little bit potentially, which is just not necessarily in a bad way, but bring you down a bit of a peg and just look, you still, you are only 7-0 now. That was great, all of that stuff in February, but that was then. You've still got to do this.
I think he gets that though.
Yeah, I was just about to say, I do think that he switched on enough to understand.
I think he will have been pleased with what he got.
But let's say Leon Williams doesn't get up from that chopping right hand in the first round. How much do you really take from that? Okay, yeah, it's great, brilliant, but you need those rounds, and there's not going to be a huge amount of people who can give him those at that level. Shout out to Leon Willings. I thought he was very, very good. Declan Taylor. Yeah,
it'd be interesting to see. When you see something like that, then, we may well see him on big cards again, but you kind of think, I'm really interested to see what he'll do now. Yeah. Because he said to me during the week, I'm targeting that English title, which he would be as an area champion. Ricky Summers is defending against Troy James, but so he can't do it imminently. But you look at that performance and you just think, I could see you winning one of them. And then we'll see what happens after that. He's it was good. It was good stuff.
Who next for Ben Whittaker? Andy, I may need some of your help for the pronunciation of this. If I butcher this, I'm really sorry. Ewaritsi Ezra Aranyika, also known as the 7th best light heavyweight in Nigeria. called out
he was the one
Ben Whittaker at the press conference. Ben seemed to think, and no comment from me, that it was maybe something that was slightly pre-orchestrated as somebody to sort of potentially be a potential opponent for him in the future. Ricky Summers, you mentioned there, that was a name that I know has been floated in the past. Obviously, has that Midlands vibe to it.
The fact that it hasn't happened yet makes me think that it probably won't.
It's not going to. Yeah.
And then when you look at the British scene, and Buatsi's British champion, obviously, we're just looking at the kind of titles he'll be targeting. Were Buatsi to box Anthony Yard, you would like that title to stay in that fight. It's above that level, but why not keep that title in that fight? You know, that'd be
very high level.
Yeah, very high level fight. Very high level.
But
it could get either way. If it stays in that one or it doesn't, that could become vacant relatively soon. The European title is an interesting one because that's vacant, and according to their latest published rankings, they've got Daniel Blender dos Santos.
Buatsi folded in half.
Yeah, and Shakan Pitters as the two guys they're looking to try and match for that vacant title. I don't know whether that is going to happen, where it's one of those things that's actually going to happen, but Shakan Pitters at some point would be a very good fight for Ben Whittaker for all sorts of reasons, because of the level he's boxed at and the fact that they're from roughly the same neck of the woods. Louis Edmondson is the one who's been positioning himself for the fight, and I don't mind that. Because Edmondson's confident. He kind of, he will absolutely think he can win. Yeah. And Leon Willings did really, really well on the weekend, but I don't think he turned up to that fight really thinking he could win, to be honest.
Yeah, we spoke to him a couple of times before the fight, and he was very kind of... And so you do read into these things beforehand, and particularly somebody who's not been on that level against, you mentioned there, like somebody who is intimidating for an abundance of reasons. And he sort of said, I did take this on short notice. And you never like to hear stuff like that, and it kind of volunteered frequently.
That was what made me wonder, because he told me that quite quickly too. I mean, it was an answer to a question I asked him, but I did think to myself, okay, like this really is a big ask. This is a tall order. And it was good that I asked Macklin the question, I think 6 or 7 rounds in, people will wonder, is this good enough from Ben Whittaker against an area level opponent who's taken the fight at short notice? Because these are the questions you have to ask, And he gave a good answer, Matt, basically praising Willings and saying, look, he's shown us plenty, but people will question him. They will question you when you're on the rise, and when you've got that kind of profile, that comes with the territory. Yeah,
it's a double-edged sword, isn't it? You can't have the smooth without the rough, or whatever. The rain without the summer. I don't know, man. It's whatever. But I think let's talk about the Ben Whittaker, Louis Edmondson fight, and somebody's undercard coming potentially soon. So we'll wait and see how that pans out. Okay, let's go back to Saturday before we move on. Good win for Callum Simpson's not very happy with me because I didn't put him on the Boxing News app. Everyone just wants to be on the app nowadays. But
and
anyway.
the Savage Babbage.
That was kind of everything we expected it to be, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was.
Steve Robinson hit the nail on the head at the pre-fight press conference, which I loved, which was like, neither of us can box, so we're going to have a fight. Brilliant. Yeah. That's exactly what we wanted.
And he was fuming when it got stopped, and that just shows the kind of
I think that could have been stopped.
No, it was the right thing.
Yeah, it could have been stopped before. I don't think was it the 6th they stopped at the 5th?
Midway, minute into the 6th or something
I think they could have pulled it. I don't think he really needed to go out for that.
Yeah, well, the trainer in between rounds, you won't have heard this, but in between rounds after 5, the trainer said to him, you've got this round, basically, and if it continues as it has, I'm going to throw the towel in. And the ref got there first, but Babbage is...
it's Babbage.
Babbage is what he is.
And then Tommy Welch, who was ringside with his dad, Scott, kind of called him out, and that'd be a good fight.
Yeah, Babbage went, I don't know who this guy is, brother.
That'd be a good fight. That'd be a good fight.
Yeah.
I don't think Tommy Welch can. I know Babbage has always boxed at heavyweight, but will he kind of go down that bridgerweight route again? I don't really know. Tommy Welch, I'm pretty sure, is too big for that, isn't he? Or
what, for bridgerweight?
Yeah.
No, he's not.
He could do it, could he?
He could do bridgerweight. Yeah, comfortably. I can't imagine. I mean, bridgerweight's 101 kilo. He could comfortably make that. He's probably not far off.
He's underneath it. He's been underneath it for his last couple of fights.
Yeah. He's not that tall, as in like for a heavyweight.
Well connected with the WBC as well.
Yeah. They do a lot down
the Welch family.
Yeah. I sparred Tommy years ago.
Conor McGregor's friend. Now he's moved on from you, mate.
Oh, wow.
It's funny because I know.
no whiskey.
Obviously, with Scott there, that's a real presence to have behind you. But what he's done a really good job of, Tommy Welch, is he does have a bit of a vibe around him, a bit of noise around him, and he's got some swagger, isn't he?
Yeah, that's something like
although as yet he hasn't done much.
Him and Conor McGregor on like the private jets and stuff like
Yeah.
that. It's just
What's up there?
How did this happen? But we're not complaining. Okay, Saturday night. Before we go on to the PBC card, there was a rather relevant fight for you, Chris, in Vegas. I don't know, man. It was in America.
Was it in Vegas?
I don't know. It was in America. No,
I don't think it was in Vegas,
Vegas.
mate. I don't know if Zerdo's boxed that many times in Vegas. He's usually in LA.
Box rec. Let's have a look.
No,
Let's have a look.
Zerdo.
Let's have a look. Super prepared. Inglewood, which is California.
Yes.
But anyway, regardless of that fact, won a pretty clear unanimous decision win over now former WBA champion Arsene Goulamirian. Obviously, a fight that you would have had a very, very keen eye on, even if the people from DAZN didn't think so. But anyway,
Did they not put him in a ranking?
didn't put him in the graphic. They put the graphic up for world
Zerdo
champion.
after, right, let's just talk about after. Zerdo wins the fight. Who can he fight next? What's he want? He's like, I want to unify. I want to become undisputed.
It's pissed me off more than it
cruiserweight
pissed him
champion.
off.
Yeah, I want to
Hates
become undisputed cruiserweight champion. So then they put a graphic up of Jaya Pataya, Noel Givor. So you got the
IBF and WBC.
Oh, he's not technically the IBF champion, but
he's got
the
a
ring
previous,
champ.
isn't he?
yeah, he's the ring champ, the WBC champ, and Lawrence Coley,
Who's fighting for a Bridgeweight title.
who's fighting for a Bridgeweight title and isn't even at cruiserweight anymore, let alone WBO cruiserweight champion of the world. But seeing as it's Bank Holiday Monday,
That's why we're going to talk about it. That's
No, I
why,
mean,
that's
let's
why we're
talk
talking
about
about it.
Let's do it.
But stuff like that really bothers me because like everybody loves
It
boxing.
was like when PBC didn't put Crawford in there.
Yeah, exactly. And it's so
That's it.
petty, and it's so like, but people then like love to talk all this shit about, but we'll work with everybody, and it's just them. They don't want to make any fights. Listen, mate, pull the other one. Like,
Look, I'm gonna get rid of Rich Rapport, and we're going stateside to fight Zerdo. So let's talk about how he won.
anyway, yes, let's do that because I'm feeling incredibly cantankerous for a change. To be fair, on Monday, what did you make of his performance? I think Zerdo. You should think in your head like, obviously it's not recently, but so it's his first full fight at cruiserweight. In my head, he's still the 168, 175 Zerdo of a few years ago, but he wasn't that, and I actually thought he boxed really well on the night.
Yeah, I thought he's kind of known as a bit more of a boxer usually, but he was quite a bit more like tucked up from what I've seen before, and he sort of kind of beat Goulamirian at his own game in a way, like in terms of like just hitting him a little, like just making him miss and then just hitting him with a couple of shots on the inside. Moved really well, really good performance. I was really impressed. Goulamirian has been inactive, and he's always, even when he was active, he kind of starts slow, sort of builds through the rounds and builds during the round themselves as well. But yeah, he couldn't land. I think the movement he struggled with, but he landed a few decent shots. Zerdo took them really well, but just kept firing back Zerdo and kept landing some really good shots of his own.
Were you surprised that he was able to because Goulamirian, the obvious point on Goulamirian is he's been super inactive. He's boxed once against Alexei Egorov since December of 2019, but is a fully fledged cruiserweight and is somebody who carries good power. He's very physically strong. But were you surprised with how Zerdo was able to deal with him?
In a way, yeah. I think Zerdo. I know he got hit a fair bit, but like he was still made him miss a hell of a lot, and just was really accurate with his shots. He's always focused. His concentration's really good, and that was probably the difference in that fight. It's probably the concentration, because Goulamirian's sort of one of these guys who backs you up to the ropes and then unloads, and then once you move and sort of switches off to reset. But Zerdo never needed that reset. Never needed to. Just stayed in his shape. Kept his shape really well and was constantly moving and making adjustments, and I think that was the key. I don't know if I was maybe a little bit more surprised. I thought it was a really good performance, so maybe I didn't think he'd be that as good as he was, but a really solid performance.
Obviously, you have business to take care of with Richard Riakporhe, who was also in attendance last night. But
he's the only one who didn't come and speak to me. I mean, Lawrence came and spoke to me. Me and Isaac were sat next to each other.
I don't want to see you guys being friendly to each other. What are you on
Oh,
about?
well, don't come and be friendly then. Just come and say something.
That's good. I'm glad he didn't. I'm glad he didn't come and say hello to you. Give it from across the way. That's what we're here for, anyway. Yeah, none of this. Shut that.
Last time we spoke to each other, he didn't. He wasn't listening to me anyway. Was he? Getting all sort of mixed up.
I was going to say, ended up getting a bit spicy, which we liked, didn't we, Andy? We liked that.
That kind of came from nowhere. You were kind of very civil, and then all of a sudden he went off on you a bit, and I don't think you were really expecting it.
I'm just talking facts, and people don't like to hear the truth. That's the issue. Yeah, go on.
I can't remember what I was going. So is that the name that you're looking? Because it's something that you've spoke about before in the past. Obviously, even after the Mateusz Masternak performance in December. Obviously, we've kind of all expected over the course of the last 6 months or so the Richard Riakporhe rematch to take place, which it's going to.
Yeah, it's going to.
But should you come through that unscathed and obviously retain your title, is the Zerdo fight, is that your one? Is that
I've always I obviously had my dream of winning a world title at the stadium, and I got to do that. So now I was like, right, what's the next dream? And that's the fight in America. So I was like, there's no one really there. And then Zerdo popped up like fighting at Cruz. I was like, maybe he could win a world title and we can unify over there. And now he's gone and done it. So Ellie Scotney's always saying to me, yeah, that'll happen. You spoke it into existence. Everything you speak into existence happens. So that's what I said to Ben last night. I said, let me finish Richard, which probably didn't like hearing because he's best pals of Richard. I was like, let me deal Richard, then we're going stateside. And he was like, yeah. And I think he realised what I actually said. He was like, oh, I don't want you to beat Richard. They're best buds. So, no, it's that's the plan for me. That's my sort of roadmap. And that'd be... I want to do like a 6-week training camp out there before and everything. It'd be an amazing experience, and then get to unify the belts as well.
Poor old Shalom. He always finds it. He had it from Boazzi, and Boazzi is easy. He's now got it from Billam-Smith. Billam-Smith React.
Yeah, but he's very chummy.
Always finds himself. Finds himself on the naughty step.
He's his firstborn son, isn't he? Like he's his first signing, so that's fine. I've got no hate. I said to him, I said, look, I'm going to ruin your Lawrence versus Richard fight when I beat Lawrence, and I did that. And then now I'm going to have to, beat his firstborn son.
Well, I remember just how happy he was after he beat Lawrence Okoli, so I don't believe that at all. But anyway, moving on. Andy, going to come to you for what has to be considered a pretty sizable upset on Saturday night. Sebastian Fundora and the new WBC and WBO, how we got there, who knows, unified super welterweight champion of the world, defeating Tszyu by decision. I mean, if Frazer Clarke and Fabio Wardley was a bloody fight, then that was another absolute massacre in there on Saturday night.
It was, and you're kind of wondering exactly how that happened, how an elbow can cause that kind of split, and then there's such an enormous amount of blood which just pours straight down the forehead, and it's obviously very difficult to stop it. And it happened early too, and you just wonder whether it would have been better if Team Tszyu had made more of an effort to get the fight stopped, basically because of the cut, because the blood loss, that's got to affect your performance, surely. It's not just it going into your eyes. It's just like you're physically losing blood.
And you could see him draining in like 4, 5, and 6. I mean, how he managed to do 12 rounds. It reminded me, the only cut that I've seen that's sort of similar was the Badu Jackie against Marcus Brown.
That was probably the worst.
And that was going out like that.
Yeah.
But... yeah, I mean, you make a good point. When you said Team Tszyu, I was like, is that an accent or something? But you were talking about the team, not Team Tszyu. Yeah, very good. But anyway, I thought that as well because, and it looked as though, because I felt like it was a really dangerous fight for Team Tszyu. I really did. I felt that, and it's easy to say after the fact, but there was a lot of talk in the week about Spence and he was going to do this and he was going to do that. Like, you've gone from a small career welterweight in Keith Thurman, an orthodox fighter, to a 6'6". Southpaw super welterweight in Sebastian Fundora. And
it's one of those things, like you say, where you look back on it in hindsight and in years to come, and he will probably think himself, what was I doing?
I was so underprepared for that style of opponent. Like, preparations matter. Like, you get into a mindset and a game plan of one way, and then all of a sudden, boom. Like, I mean, all credit to Fundora coming in that late. I don't know. Was he fighting anyway? Like
he was boxing.
he
He was due to box Sergio Bohachuk on the undercard, who also had a fantastic win over Brian Mendoza. Really dominated that fight. That was a brilliant performance from Bohachuk on the undercard.
Bohachuk must be guaranteed the winner. He must have been guaranteed the winner, wouldn't he? B of Tszyu, Fundora. Because he was supposed to be fighting.
I feel like Errol Spence might.
Yeah, I was going to say, like, that's what I mean.
Yeah,
You've
if
got
you're
Spence.
Bohachuk, you're just like ringside thinking, fucking.
I mean, Crawford as well. Crawford, like, the plan was for Crawford to move up to 54, become super champion with the WBO, move up, invoke his mandatory status at 154 pounds. Now Spence is. Well, he's in the ring at the end of the fight, something that PBC kind of historically do very well.
He's not near 154 pounds, though.
No, but I mean, sure, plenty of time. You would be able to get down there, yeah. But that's something that PBC have kind of historically done well, haven't they? If you look at like the welterweight, there was a period of time where like, as soon as a welterweight fight would finish, Danny Garcia would be in the ring, Keith Thurman would be in the ring, Errol Spence would be in the ring, and that fight would happen next. Which, by the way, I'm all for. I think that stuff works. That's how you should do it.
Yeah, it just keeps it progresses the narrative, doesn't it?
Yeah, exactly. It makes it easy for people to follow.
It gets people to turn the page and they know what's going on, and that's it. Having the Azeem Eubank announcement in the ring the other night. That's what you want. You want when you've got a big night, you want to be announcing other big nights. That's the way to do it, definitely.
Yeah. But the fact that Errol Spence managed to sort of work his way into the picture, and by all accounts as well, Tszyu didn't have a rematch clause when you're taking on a 6'6" late replacement southpaw.
That's bad management.
Samson Lukovitz, who's promoter of Sebastian Fundora, was asked about it after the fight, and he said, "Well, we have a verbal agreement."
That doesn't mean much, does it?
That's Samson Lukovitz, the former lawyer. So he knows exactly what a verbal agreement means. Yeah. I don't, because again, that's the sort of fight where, and full disclosure, I felt that the first couple of rounds, I felt Fundora looked gun shy. I felt like he was wary of getting hit, and I thought Tszyu was tagging him and breaking him down, and I kind of looked at him and thought, okay, well, Tszyu's going to get this over with in sort of the middle rounds and break him down. But Chris, that cut completely changed the fight. I mean, how could it not?
Yeah, I get how could it not, but so quick. Like, you might think a couple of rounds it would change it. I mean, they couldn't stop the blood. No. Like, they had nothing was stopping that blood. And I don't know how much was going in his eye. I can't remember what round, but straight away I can't remember how bad it was affecting his eye in terms of the blood pouring from his head. Really weird how it happened, and that's just boxing sometimes. He's just
6'6" guy. And the elbows
and he's just dipped underneath and just literally hit his elbow. But Fundora, he must have taken confidence from it, because he just started throwing a bit more, and he's awkward. Like, the way he throws, because he's so long, he doesn't have to reach for anything. So there's less tells because he's so long with his range. All he has to do is turn his body and move his arm. Whereas when you're a shorter fighter, so he's got to get his feet in as well. So then there's more tells because the body's got to produce more power to get into range. So, and he was just able to let his shots go and just keep switching Tszyu off. Just kept switching him off with little short shots. I say short, they're obviously long for him, but nothing shots. They weren't massive shots, but landing very frequently. And the cut had a massive effect.
But yeah, you mentioned there kind of giving him that confidence. I did feel like, and I felt it's funny because on the way into the fight, people talking about the Mendoza stoppage loss that Fundora had in his last fight. And my kind of view on that was he was dominating the fight until he got caught with a really snappy shot that really, can knock anybody out with a shot like that. But I didn't necessarily think Fundora would be the type of fight, because the way that he's fought in the past, he's very much, he lets his hands go, he takes a few, and kind of that's how he fights. But I did feel like there was a discernible difference in him in those first couple of rounds. And you could just see him in 3 and 4 going, I can win this. And it's for the first time. I mean,
it's funny how Chris mentioned it, though. You can take confidence from all sorts of things, and seeing the blood, even though you haven't caused it, well, you have, but not legally, that can just really pick you up.
Yeah, and for sure, and you could see it as the fight progressed, and then sort of towards the end of the fight. And to be fair to Tszyu, the fact that he was still in there, and he won a few rounds as well. I only gave it to I didn't give it to Fundora by a couple of points, so it was still a close fight, considering the amount of blood that was on there. It was remarkable, but sort of saving it for his biggest night was the first time that he'd really used that range properly, consistently for a fight, because he does love that, get in there and mix it up. You know, it's what everybody was saying about him before the fight. Yeah, he's 6'6", but he fights like he's 5'9".
Yeah.
But
a Tower Inferno, what a name.
Yeah,
and then the kit, the black kit with the flames, like the old school disco shirts that you used to get. Loved it. Like everything about that is so cool. It's like one of the things in boxing, like you know, that entertainment side, which is that was really cool. But like he boxed well, but it just needed like a little bit of a
little big help.
Yeah, a little bit of just confidence. And like you never know if he'd had that confidence from the start of the fight in his own head from whatever, just his own belief, then he might have been able to do that earlier. But it doesn't matter where you get it from. When all that matters is winning, you get the confidence to perform.
And it puts us back on track for the fight that the boxing world needs, which is Sebastian Fundora against Hamza Shiraz. So we can move Sebastian Fundora up, and we can make that fight. That's the fight the world needs to see. That's what I want to see.
Giants.
Mate, imagine that.
At that weight, that is some giants.
Unbelievable.
How tall is Hamza?
Massive. I don't know.
He's taller than me. He's 6'4" or something.
Yeah, he's like 6'5", I think he is. He's a big lump. And Fundora's 6'5" and a half.
Fundora is an inch.
Is Shiraz that tall?
He's big, man.
I know he's tall.
Yeah, let's have a look.
Feel like he would be tall. I thought he's maybe like 6.
Box, I was just about to say that. Shout out Box Gray.
It's not. I mean, in their defence, some fighters refuse to get measured. I went through a stage of trying to measure fighters when I was doing the stats for Sky. Some of them would do it, some of them wouldn't. And people would say to me, it's one of those great ones where they'd just say, well, you should just insist. Right. So I'm going to say to like
on the fight week.
Yeah. I know you haven't eaten in 2 days, but
that you allow me to get my take. But what are you talking about?
You need one of those focus groups. Stand there for a sec.
Yeah.
Rather than go like, mate,
Yeah,
put this in the back of your shoe. Oh no, do it again.
It's like a mug shot.
Yeah.
Get them done like that. Yeah. But anyway, I thought it was a very good performance from Sebastian Fundora. Has to have a big asterisk on it though because of the cut. Surely, I mean, like. And I do feel like while Sebastian Fundora, Samson Lukowicz and PBC will obviously have their own ideas as to... I mean, Samson said the same thing, said another thing after. He said, the rematch will happen. I'm not sure if it'll be next. Obviously, my job as a promoter is to look for the best commercial option.
That's
if you're
code.
Tszyu, you're sitting there like, fuck
yeah, that's like, code. Yeah. It's one of those situations where you just think...
That absolutely really deserves. That should be a rematch.
Deserves it. He gave you the opportunity at short notice. I know he was on the card anyway, but all of a sudden you're boxing in a world title unification. He's taking you at short notice, totally different to who he was expecting. All that kind of stuff. He definitely deserves one. But if it's not there in black and white, then
it's not looking good. But Chris, just from your perspective, I mean, a lot of. And how much it means to him, I'm sure really not much at this stage. But there's a lot of credit for Tszyu, rightfully so, for taking that challenge on 12 days' notice. I mean, you couldn't really get two more polar opposite styles.
Yeah.
But it has subsequently cost him his world title. So where do you stand on that as a fighter?
From a fighter, from my point of view, yeah, I'll fight him. Like, you're 12 days out, you're ready to go. You fight him, you're already thinking what you're going to do with your money, like invest it in this, that and the other. So you got this plan, you got a little holiday maybe planned, and then you're thinking, right, there's another win, I can move on to the next fight, and then it just puts a massive stall. So you're like, right, I'll get rid of him. He fights small, he does this, so I'll get to him and I'll be able to take part. And you back yourself, especially on 12 days notice, you're backing yourself, your confidence is sky high, you're coming up to your last spar. But then it comes to the management's point of view, have the fight, but just put a rematch clause in there. It's that simple. I think that's the only reason that's a wrong decision, is because there's no rematch clause. Like, have that in the contract. Although obviously they can sometimes be missed, but in that situation, I don't think it would ever been the style of fighter Tszyu is and stuff like that. It would have the rematch would have happened for sure. But yeah. All credit to him, that's what you want. And I think coming from the stock that he comes from, he's never gonna go, nah, don't fancy that fight. Like, he's gonna back himself. But yes, a massive upset.
He also had, sort of in a similar vein, a lot of credit for battling on with a horrendous cut. But again, is that sort of in vain? I mean, he's battled on with it, which I don't think he really needed to. I thought that fight, if So
But if he pulls out the fight, you lose the fight. So you're always going to fight. As in, like, if he decides it's over.
But the corner can decide that. Well,
no,
make a big song and dance about it.
Yeah, they can
make
like,
because that was bad. I mean, the cut was. There wasn't. As you said earlier, I mean, the cut wasn't there, and then when it was there, it was.
Yeah.
It was. There was no. It was no gradual. It didn't get any bigger.
That's a key distinction to make. Like what they have to do in that, they have
ref,
to
look at this.
make a fuss to get the ref to get the doctor who stops it. And then it's inside 4 rounds, and it's a no contest. They would call it over. I'm pretty sure. Yeah. Or if it was into the 5th, then you go to the cards, and maybe he's winning at that point.
Yeah, you could have nicked it at that point. But I think it might have been Adam Abramovitz who tweeted, and he said, "I just could never imagine like an Emmanuel Stewart fighter or a Lou Duva fighter seeing the 5th round. If that's the case, you've got a massive gash here on the top of your head, and like." Obviously, it's very, very difficult to think about these things in the moment. But the whole story of how everything's kind of, again, hindsight's a wonderful thing in anything, but particularly in boxing. You look back at all of there was a few upset, checkpoints, as it were. A late replacement, completely different style. Then you have a really bad cut early in the fight. That spells trouble, doesn't it? Like that doesn't signify a nice serene defense of your world title, does it?
Yeah. No, and you're right. Like these things everything's easy with hindsight, but something like this particularly, but. Maybe a really experienced guy at that point would have thought, okay, like this is just not meant to be. I've got to get this stopped. And I feel like it probably wouldn't have been that hard to do, as in, just gesturing towards it. I mean, look at that. You can't expect somebody, he'll fight on, but we can't, I mean, come on, all that kind of thing. Yeah. Maybe...
Even when the doctor's walking up the steps, the corner going, he needs to be pulled out, really. Like to the other, the other corner.
You keep the fighter safe from stuff like that. Tim Tszyu in the ring going, terrible! Come on, I want to fight, but you save your man for another day. You save his world title for another day. Yeah. No rematch clause.
That's the biggest issue with all of that. Is this no rematch clause? Because then they could just pull him out of the fight. Like if he's got a rematch clause, they could just pull him out after 4 or 5 rounds.
Yeah, even if he loses, it doesn't even matter.
Yeah, just pull him out, and then we'll have the rematch, which is what Ben Davison did with Lee Wood in the Lara fight, and they had the rematch clause. So I remember at the time thinking, why have they pulled him out? And then they had the rematch clause, so it makes sense. And it's a really strange one, that.
It's going to be interesting to see where Fundora goes. He's now got options upon options upon options.
Does, yeah.
Like he's gone from a guy who's on the back of a knockout loss.
It's a great boxing story from his side, isn't it?
It just shows how quickly the sport changes, doesn't it? Like
absolutely.
You're down in the dumps one day, the next day you're the unified champion of the world. You've got Terence Crawford here, Errol Spence here, Tim Tszyu way over there.
These 2 big dogs. You've got these 2 big dogs. Well, the biggest dog outside of the heavyweight division of Crawford, probably. Chasing you around. I mean, that's... Yeah. Well, it doesn't sound great, but actually it is great.
Bicep injury. Oh, yeah. But he's at the stage of his career now where...
I loved watching Furman, stylistically.
Remember we watched him box Manny Pacquiao after the first Richard Riakporhe fight?
Yeah. But, I mean, I remember watching Box Nation. Then I went over to America for the Canelo Mayweather fight. And I seen him in the lobby of the MGM. I said, Keith, can I have a photo? And he, frowned at me frowned at me how does this English guy know who I am? Like, this English kid. Because I would have looked about 16 probably at the time. I was 23, but that's all right. But I always loved his style. But yeah, it's a shame. I don't know how much he would have been able to give Tim Tszyu. I think he probably would have got soundly beaten. Where does Tszyu go now? Like, what's he do?
I think he still obviously has a big name, and I think one would hope as well that obviously it will come down to the numbers as it always does. So commercially, he's still a viable fighter. Of course he is, and it was a great fight. And if you're in the PBC and Amazon business, it was a blood and guts thriller as your main event for your first show. So everyone's a winner in that regard.
Absolutely.
I don't want to be a cynic, but. The fight does get pulled after 3 rounds. That's a pretty fucking flat way to get things. I'm sure that didn't impact on any doctor or anything like that. But goes, and then if you're on the PBC, you look at Tszyu and go, all right, he dug in there, he gave a real good account of himself, but obviously he's still a big name. He's still somebody who you would imagine. I mean, Bo Hatchuk, who I think won an interim something or other on the undercard against Mendoza. It's a good fight for Tim Tszyu. If we could end up with Fundora against Spence, Tim Tszyu against Terence Crawford. How about that? That's a good one.
So that's an expensive card.
Yes. But mate, the card at the weekend would have been expensive. There was 6 fights on
Amazon got a lot of money, but
Amazon,
I don't know they got that much money for one show.
Well, yeah, not on the same card. Not on the same card. I mean, in general, but you never know. You never know. This weekend was stacked. And with that being said, let's move on to our second world title offering of that card, which was Isaac Pitbull Cruz becoming the new WBA super lightweight champion. Really, with a dominant, destructive performance against Rolando Romero. Really impressed, Chris. I was with Pitbull Cruz.
Yeah, Rolly's a weird one. Like he just doesn't look very well schooled. Like he does the right things, but just the technique sometimes just obviously can punch. But yeah, just looks a bit like out of sorts at times in the way he throws his shots. I mean, his head's up in the air a lot of the time. Not really what you want from when you're fighting someone like Cruz who's winging in hooks.
Or Davis.
I mean, you don't. There's a lot of things you don't need against Tank, but yeah, it's and it was a dominant performance, like you said. Just walked him down and just kept landing.
I think the most impressive thing for me, Andy, was the shot that really. I mean, I don't know how much Rolando Romero really recovered from the first round, where he took. I'll tweet something. Words to the effect of Romero's at his most vulnerable when he's throwing his shots because he does so many things wrong, and it's not really something that I expected Cruz to be a little bit more compact and get there first in between sort of the wide shots of Romero. But the shot that actually kind of did it was a lovely shot. He caught sort of the right hand from Romero as he walked in. It's just a nice short left hook, and then after that, Romero never ever recovered. And yeah, I thought that was as far as kind of statement wins go for Pitbull Cruz, it couldn't really have gone much better.
No, and it's quite surprising how often something that happens really early can, without you knowing it at the time, necessarily be the end. Because let's say he was concussed by that blow in the first round, then at that point, he doesn't have much chance of winning, to be honest, unless he can level that score with his opponent quickly. And so they're both in a similar state. And you get that in fights. And, we may well have had that last night with Fabio Wardley and Frazer Clarke. We can't see inside their heads, so we don't really know. But if you get hit hard enough and clean enough early, even if you survive it, you've survived it in that moment, but it will have registered to an extent that means it's going to be very hard for you to win. And it's just a case, really, of how long can you stay in there? And it does kind of sound like one of them, to be honest, if we had some kind of way of monitoring that, which obviously we don't. The writing can be on the wall early, but such are their powers of recovery, fighters, and their instinct to keep fighting, their ability to keep fighting in circumstances where it wouldn't be possible for an average person. They make it look like they're still in there with a chance when in reality they're probably not.
And credit to Romero because he did stay in there and hang tough in some really tough rounds. Even the round before it got stopped, he was hammered for that whole.
I was surprised he got through the first round. I
Yeah.
genuinely was. So when
he
that
didn't even
landed,
go down.
No,
even in the
that's
first
it.
round.
And I just thought he's going to get rid of him here. He looked all over the place, and
it wasn't like he buzzed him and then he kept landing and landing and landing, and Romero was all over the place.
Yeah.
But somehow, I mean, credit to him because he showed unbelievable toughness to stay in there. But I mean, yeah, they saved him, I think, at the right time. I think if it would have gone any longer, I think he was very much done. But another change of titles, another big player in a division, Andy, that is, as we know, as we've spoken about over the last few months, is becoming the division in the sport, isn't it? It's there or thereabouts.
Yeah, it is. It's got 4 different champions, and they've all got really entertaining aspects to them. So you would want to see any of them fight each other. You look at Haney, Teofimo Lopez, Subriel Matias, and now Cruz. I mean, that's a great mix. I'd watch any of those.
All on different networks.
That's the problem.
Let's go, champ. But yeah, that's going to be interesting. A real shame as well because Matias was with PBC as well, and I think, don't be wrong, I think probably Haney and the good version of Teofimo Lopez is probably the one.
So Lopez is top ranked. He's ESPN, isn't he?
Yeah.
Matias is now Matchroom. Is that right?
Yeah. But my point being,
is Haney not Matchroom? I think Eddie likes to claim Haney
Devin
as
Haney
Matchroom, doesn't he?
Promotions.
Yeah, of course.
Devin Haney Promotions. But yes, obviously boxing on the zone. I think it's a Golden Boy card.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely a relationship there.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, but yeah. Anyway, my point on that is that okay, Haney and Lopez, I think like the best version of them is probably the one for the supremacy, whereas Matias and Pitbull is the one for the streets.
Yeah,
that's the one for the streets, isn't it? Imagine that. Matias against Pitbull Cruz, just
tremendous.
two absolute animals. Just yeah, that's the one that we want to see.
And we're not going to.
No, we're definitely not going to. But before we move on, we ask this every time there is a shift, a disturbance in the force in the super lightweight division. Who's going to be around when all the dust settles? Who's going to be the last man standing at 140? Assuming they all fight each other at 140, which they won't.
I mean, I'd say Haney. I think he's the most consistent and also really, really good. The best Teofimo Lopez could beat pretty much anyone, I reckon. And he is a big fight performer, but I'm not as confident about his level of performance as I would be about Haney's.
He's boxing Steve Claggett, isn't he?
Yeah.
Teofimo Lopez. That's not a great fight.
Well, not for him, no, because again, it's just like, will he get up for that? What Lopez will turn up for that?
You think about like Top Rank, and we've all spoken about this on several instances in the past. You know, they tend to get it right, don't they?
Yeah,
with the match,
but with
and
him,
who
it's
they
hard,
match
isn't it?
with.
Because you feel like you need to keep him busy because you don't want him away from the ring for too long. But at the same time, he needs.
It's got to be something to stimulate him and get him going. But on the back of another pretty lackluster performance against Jermaine Ortiz, I think Claggett, somebody likes to come forward, likes to throw shots. I think they'll mix it up.
Suited.
Much better suited. So I think that is a good indicator of where Top Rank maybe see Lopez at the maybe need something like that where he can deliver a show real knockout
Just
and
don't
get
give
that juices
him
going again.
Don't give him a southpaw.
No one who can
moves.
move. One who can move. Which kind of, I mean, I always liked Lopez over Haney, but now I'm not really sure if that fight were to happen. How would you see that going, Chris?
It's a hard one. I think,
assuming Ryan Garcia doesn't shock the world and actually make the fight against Teofimo Lopez, against Devin Haney, rather.
That's another story for another day.
Yeah, we don't have enough time.
I mean, Haney got beat by Loma.
Yeah, I thought so as well.
Yeah, and I think because he got a decision, people sometimes forget that he did get beat. Like most people thought he got beat.
Yeah.
But then the same could be said for Tszyu against Sandor Martin and
maybe Jermaine
Ortiz and stuff like that. So it's one of them. But yeah, it's a tough one because Haney can move and he can box well on the back foot. Even when he lost to Loma, he boxed superb. Like I think it was a highly skilled fight. One of the most highly skilled fights in recent years for sure. So if you're in the Haney camp, you're going to be right. If you're fighting him, you're going to be telling him to move and do this and be negative. But he's got enough about him to have enough attack as well and still dominate when he is being negative, if that makes sense. So it's a tough one. But Tszyu would turn up, I think, for a fight like that. And yeah, I mean, the very best of both, I think Tszyu would win if it's the best of both. But that's the question, isn't it? Are you going to get the best Tszyu? Where, like Andy said, Haney's very consistent in his performances. Like I said, against Loma, he still boxed superb. I just didn't think it was enough. But we're talking about Lomachenko here, who on his day is one of the best fighters of the last however many years. So yeah, it's a tough one, but we're probably not going to see it. So
consistency builds success.
It does.
Trademarked by Chris Billam-Smith.
It is trademarked.
There we go.
Clothing range coming out soon.
Look forward to it. Get me a triple XL. Anyway, we don't have time to work our way all the way through that PBC card because it was super duper stacked. So we're just going to go through some of the highlights. Julio Cesar Martinez retaining his WBC flyweight title in a pretty close fight against Angelino Cordova. I thought that he nicked it, but he did just nick it for me. Julio Cesar Martinez. I mentioned Saho Bahachuk really battered Brian Mendoza. I don't know how Mendoza managed to stay in there for 12 rounds. His face, he looked like he'd been in a car accident at the end of it. I don't know if you saw, like a big jaw out here. Look, awful. And then, of course, Kamel Moten going the distance for the first time in his fledgling career. 17-year-old wonder kid out of the Mayweather gym in Las Vegas. So it was a good card, good show. Enjoyed it.
How many fights Moten on now? 3.
He's 3-0 with 2 by way of. The first 2 went in the first round. Boxed Anthony Cuba this weekend, who's in his own right, unbeaten prospect. I thought he made Moten work, but Moten looks very, very good. Looks very, very good. Interested to see how quickly they're moving. We're already on an 8-rounder there at 17 years old. That's his 3rd unbeaten opponent in 3 fights as a professional. And Cuba, what level the wins came at, but he was clearly similar to sort of Leon Willins, really, in a sense of he was in there with a sort of supersonic prospect. But if you actually look at what he was doing, there was a lot to like about Cuba. So yeah, looking forward to seeing Kamel Moten. If you want to find out more about Kamel Moten, Boxing News' very own Declan Taylor caught up with him. Check that out in the latest Boxing News magazine and online. But okay, we're almost there, boys. We're almost there. We're cooking. Friday night, Oscar Valdez got a pretty much needed win. I think he's at the stage now, Chris, where we've all enjoyed and loved watching Oscar Valdez over the years. He's given us all tremendous value, but that was a hard fight last time out against Emmanuel Navarrete where he took a lot of shots. So it was kind of one of those where we sort of didn't really know how much he had left. And it turns out, more than enough to be a very, very capable fighter.
Yeah. It was, Wilson was decent. I was pretty impressed. Never seen much of him before, to be honest. But yeah, it's... I think early on he took his time a little bit, not necessarily just let's go forward and absolutely throw bombs where you've seen him some wars over the years, which it's nice to see they haven't taken too much out of him. But yeah, looked very solid, and a decent fight, a decent sort of 50-50 fight in a way where and then you could just see the experience, and Valdez is just coming through a little bit more. I thought early on, Wilson was doing okay because he was a little bit more consistent, trying to push his style on him, and then had to hold his feet a little bit more, and then Valdez, was having more and more success.
Andy mentioned there about Oscar Valdez. He's been a very, very entertaining fighter over the years. He's been in his fair share of rock'em sock'em wars, but in his recent times, sort of tried to be a little bit more of a boxer. I know we spoke before coming on air about that brilliant win he had over Miguel Berchelt. Still a big name, and he's a 2-weight world champion. Where would you like to see him go next? Because it seemed as though if he would have lost to Liam Wilson, there wouldn't really have been many areas for him. He could have become, with respect, a big name opponent for somebody on the way up. But winning and getting a stoppage and looking good in doing so does open up some potential avenues for him at £130.
Yeah, you think so, because he's, like you said, he's been a big name for a while now, and you always kind of knew that he was capable of doing it a number of different ways, because he's got that pedigree from the Olympics and all the rest of it, but he is good to watch, and he's always been good to watch, and he is Mexican, and there is an expectation if you're a Mexican fighter of how you will go about things, and it just seems like there really isn't any choice but to conform to that to varying degrees. They don't all fight the same, but it is demanded of them that they be capable of putting their nuts on the chopper more often than other people. That's just how it is for them.
I must have Mexican in me.
I wouldn't. Are you a fan of putting your nuts on the chopper, Chris?
Wow.
Are you a nut chopper?
Metaphorically speaking, yeah. Not literally. Yeah. I must have some Mexican in me.
Anyway.
Yeah, but he's. I wouldn't say that he's got ages left necessarily.
No.
And he's just going to want whatever the biggest fight out there is for him, to be honest.
Yeah, some names rolling around. I think that was for an interim bout, so WBO interim bout.
Yeah,
Navarrete's moving up as a need to fight Denis Berinchyk for the vacant lightweight title. That'll be a good fight.
Yeah,
be a good fight. Navarrete and Berinchyk, both guys who are sort of.
It's been a slow burn, Berinchyck's career.
But we've spoken about this for a long time, haven't we? Where he sort of he defended that WBO international 35 times, and he's just waited for a position to open up whereby he gets. And if you're in the Denis Berinchyk business, you're looking at Navarrete and thinking,
which your big pal,
Mr. Krasiuk very much is.
And they were really building him at home because he's famous. He's a big star in Ukraine.
They love him
big
over
star.
there, don't they?
I went over and did a card for Alex in late 2021. It would have been, and that was going to be the first of a few. It was on ESPN Plus, and he was headlining, and he loves a ring entrance and all that kind of thing. He's a big star there. He'd been on their version of Dancing with the Stars, all that kind of stuff. And then of course the war happens, and he can't box in Ukraine. And he boxed at Wembley, didn't he, on the undercard?
Yeah, boxed
Fury's
Yvonne
undercard.
Mendy.
Yeah. So it's been a long time coming, because he was an Olympic silver medalist back in 2012, wasn't he, on that supersonic Ukrainian team with Lomachenko and Usyk and Gvozdyk and Celestiuk and all of those guys. So I wish him the best, because he's likable too.
It'd be great as well.
He's good fun.
If he picks up the WBO and Lomachenko picks up the IBF.
Yeah, I mean that's what they've been talking about in Ukraine for a really long time. Is the possibility of that fight.
Yeah, and you'd think that would be easily done as well. So that's for the IBF. That's for the WBO. WBA at lightweight. Davis has that. And then the WBC at lightweight. What the WBC at lightweight?
Well, it was
Haney.
Yeah, obviously.
WBC lightweight title. Sorry, it's been
Where's Shakur at now?
Yeah, he's got it. He got it. Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, I can't believe that we forgot that fight. His last fight to win the title obviously wasn't the greatest that we've seen. He's boxing Artem Harutyunyan now, isn't he? Who went the distance and pushed Frank Martin very close. Getting a lot of stick for that, Shakur Stevenson.
He gets quite a lot of stick generally. I find. He's one of those fighters, isn't he? People are quick to.
I don't mind that fight at all.
Kind of comes back to what I was saying earlier about Vidal. Like he's doing like maybe boring fights, but winning. But it's a world title, so it's like you can't really blame. And you know how good he is. Like that's kind of his style in a way. Like he gets a lot of stick for being boring and running and whatever, but when you're doing it for world titles, it's kind of like
multiple world titles. Yeah. So he's a freeweight world champion now.
Yeah, and he's very early on still in terms of his career. I'd say in terms of he's probably got a few years left yet. Like, so yeah. We've
all kind of discussed the lightweights, and now kind of lightweights come super lightweights because they've all sort of grown up over the last couple of years. I think when we've discussed it, the general feeling is that he would be the one who separates himself from the crowd. Do we still feel like that? Do we still feel that Shakur Stevenson, when all the dust settles between 135 and 147 or wherever they may end up, he's going to be the one? Is he the one that you're buying the stock in?
I don't know, because whether we can or cannot make a judgment on that in years to come depends on how much they fight each other, which obviously is impossible to predict, really. He doesn't set your pulse racing in the way that some of the others can, for the reasons that Chris just outlined, which is that he tends to do enough, and quite often comfortably enough, but enough. So that might be the frustration that he has. Maybe he feels he doesn't really get enough credit for being able to win titles without really clicking through the gears, because you've got to be really, really good to do that. But fighters like that often tend to get underappreciated. People want to see someone get up off the floor and turn it around, and it's after doing something like that they're afforded that status of being a real warrior and all the rest of it. But if you're that good that you never have to do that, then sometimes you can find yourself in a position where you're just not as loved as you would be as fighters who do that. Yeah.
Too good for your own good.
And it's not like he's had like when Mayweather was obviously at lightweight, like was really super exciting, and then kept the entertainment outside the ring when he started getting a bit more boring and defensive in terms of and just winning on points all the time. Like he hasn't really had that phase of
Stevenson's not had like a Corrales or something like he looks at a sensational
and the Gatti and stuff like that,
or just a big rival. Like, someone to... I mean, they're out there, but it's got to happen, isn't it?
Yeah, and, when you have... And this is not us making excuses for anybody. I do personally think he will be the one who kind of eventually establishes himself. But if you're in the Gervonta Davis business or something like that, why are you looking at Shakur Stevenson and go, oh, yeah, that guy?
You're not. And that's
we'll fight the master boxer.
Yeah, you're not. No. And that's potentially the problem that you've got. So it could... And this happens quite often in boxing careers, doesn't it? That fighters can win titles, but they can wait quite a long time before they get those big defining fights that they really want, because lots of things have to align, don't they? The other person needs to want to do it. There has to be the cooperation between promoters and networks and all that kind of thing. There's just so many moving parts with it all. And I'd imagine it can be really, really frustrating.
Absolutely. Okay, right. Final fight we're going to discuss before we wrap things up. We've been going for a little while, haven't we? We've been going for a while. Yeah, it's been a long one today. Sorry about that. But anyway, Sinisa Estrada, and he became the undisputed world minimum weight champion with a unanimous decision win over Valle in a very good fight. Number 1 against number 2 in the division. Sinisa Estrada has remained unbeaten and really pulled it out of the fire, and we have a new undisputed champion.
Yeah, it's always good to get an undisputed champion for first off, and we've had loads in the last few years after a long time where we had, very, very few. With the 4 belts, we had Hopkins, didn't we, and Cecilia Brækhus, Jermaine Taylor,
sort of
who won them all
while
from Hopkins.
Yeah, exactly.
So he didn't, it wasn't the same kind of like build process. And then there was a long gap, and then I think it was Crawford.
Yeah.
And then there's been a
Crawford,
rash of
Taylor,
them.
Usyk.
Yeah,
anyway.
there's been plenty of them since. I like Estrada. She's got a good story behind her. I did her fight against Marlon Esparza, and there was a good bit of spice around that. Yeah. And that was one where they built that.
They boxed in a Wilder Fury 2 undercard. They boxed somewhere in. I was at that fight. When was it?
I think that might have been one we did off the TV. I can't quite remember.
I'll find it.
But that was one of those ones where they were able to build that.
Canelo Kovalev undercard.
That's it. Yeah. That's it. They were able to build that appealing narrative, although often not necessarily true. If you've got one who's like the Olympian and kind of like Silver Spoon or whatever, and that's Esparza, and then you've got the kind of like spit and sawdust fighter, and that was Estrada. But she's good to watch. And a worthy, I think, a worthy undisputed champ, and it'd be interesting to see what she does, because female fighters are more adept at kind of just moving up and down, and I mean, she's got to be looking to try and dominate in a number of divisions now. You think?
Yeah, you would expect it. It seemed
was it £3 difference to the next division?
Yeah, to 108.
Yeah.
Up to light fly. But yeah, and it seems as we all know, kind of the sort of double-edged sword of the lack of depth means that sometimes it's easier to make fights. And
yeah, it definitely is.
Yeah, so
she's a big she's quite a big
draw
star.
there.
But considering how many minimum weight male world champions have been as big a draw as her, do you know what I mean? She's seems like quite a big draw, and that will help make fights going up the weights for other
is she
girls.
Top rank, is she? Yeah, has she been?
She was with Golden Boy.
She's always been top rank, has she? No, that's it.
She was with Golden Boy, so she boxed on that when she boxed on that Canelo Kovalev undercard. But I think she was. I'm not sure if it's. I think she was top ranked, then Golden Boy, then top rank. I think.
Right.
But she was definitely with Golden Boy. It's quite interesting on the night of the weekend. You see afterwards, Sinisa Estrada's former trainer, who now trains Valle. And there's sort of like, and Valle is now Golden Boy, where she used to be and stuff. So it was good. It had that nice additional element to it. Right, before we round things off, just run through a few other highlights from that card. Raymond Murataya, I think, had the opportunity to impress and stake his claim for a big fight at lightweight, and didn't really do that against. It's been a long weekend, so we'll just go for the surname, Ndongeni. And Richard Torres Jr., something sort of put towards you, Andy. Still quite slow and steady with Mr. Richard Torres Jr. Admittedly, blew Donald Hainsworth out in a round, which in itself is a decent result. Not too many people have done that. I don't think anyone's done that early to Donald Hainsworth. But still not really pushing on as some may have expected him to early on in his career.
Yeah, maybe not. He's not the biggest, is he?
No.
And that's one thing that you could maybe factor in. But it's not the case that all top heavyweights are 270. That's just not true. There's still plenty of them around. Who's 6'2", 220? There's plenty around 240. It's not. You don't have to be absolutely massive. And he did have a really good amateur career, obviously. But when he turned pro, I felt like he would be good to watch, but I wasn't convinced that he would necessarily go that far. At top rank, Jared Anderson is the one that they're more excited about. He's creating problems for himself at the minute, but hopefully he can sort those out. But I'd say the heavyweight division's still pretty strong, and if I looked at a top 10 or top 15, I'm not sure there's any in there who I would feel that he could beat. To be honest,
certainly not at this stage.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, he's only
but it's early doors still.
Yeah, very much so. And he's
fights he had now?
good to watch. He's had 9 fights. Nine fights, 9 wins, 9 stoppages.
So he's done what's been asked of him, basically.
Has only been...
He's wild, isn't he? It's great to watch.
Only been past 2 rounds twice in those 9. So he went 8 rounds. He stopped Curtis Harper in his previous fight before this weekend in the 8th round. And then he went into the 3rd round against Ahmed Hefny. Interesting to see where they take him. Obviously, Jared Anderson's been moved a lot quicker, but Richard Torres, Olympic silver medalist. Silver in the world as well, didn't he? Did he get a silver in the world when Jalalov flatlined him? Was that in the final? Was that earlier on? I don't think that
was the final. I think it was earlier on.
But still top international amateur, and just wonder how quickly they decide to move him. Certainly not necessarily a criticism. He's only had a handful of fights, and top rankers have shown time and time again over generation over generation know exactly what they're doing.
It's premature for me to talk about who could he beat in the top 15. Actually, like you say, he's 9-0.
But like what you look at him and you look at the fight last night, like
Richard Torres against Frazer Clarke.
Yeah, just like in terms of like experience wise, obviously Torres got silver.
And he's still a baby as well. He's only 24, which for a heavyweight is still very young.
That is very young.
Interesting to see what they do with him. I do like the whole thing.
Time is very much on his side.
And while they're kind of seemingly, I wouldn't say building him slowly, but while they're not in any hurry at the early stages of his career, they're trying to sort of pad around his PR side of things. He seems quite a funny, quirky guy, which I'm all for as well. Love the 70s porn star moustache. Although if I ever see Richard, I'm really sorry that I said that because he can certainly fight a little bit. Okay, I think that's everything. It's definitely not, and I'm sure there's going to be people who go, you didn't talk about... I'm sorry, man, do your own podcast. But we'll wrap it up there for today.
And let you get some sleep, mate. I think.
Mate, it's just not... I feel drunk, which is... not really a drinker, as you know, so it's strange. But anyway, a boxing hangover, I think. But what a weekend of boxing it was. Last night was fantastic. It's much easier to drag yourself into the studio on the back of a very, very good one. And it was a very, very good one last night. But anyway, I'm rambling now. It's 6 o'clock in the morning, kitchen vibes. Thanks very much, guys, for joining us. And thank you to you for putting up with us for a very interesting episode of the Boxing Show today. But from me, Rob Tebbutt, from the WBO Cruiserweight Champion of the World, and from Mr. Andy Clarke, thank you very much for joining us on the award-winning Combat Sports Podcast, The Boxing Show. And we'll catch up with you next week.